G'day on the Monday after the Brazil Grand Prix from the Hilton in Sao Paulo. And didn't we have some action on the weekend? Kevin Magnussen's first pole position, George's first win, Lando being ill, and the dramas for Max Verstappen on Sunday. More in 8 seconds' time. To talk about in this video, so let's jump back to Thursday, Media Day. In the paddock, the only paddock that features a covering so when it rains we don't get wet, I found Daniel Ricciardo and Jack Doohan chatting. After they finished chatting, I talked to Jack and he told me that he'll be working with Daniel's trainer Michael Italiano. Now of course Jack hasn't got an F1 drive, but I understand that if Logan Sargent doesn't get the required super license points and he can't take that seat at Williams, Jack Doohan is next in line. And on the subject of trainers, I took this picture late Thursday evening out on the track with Piru Salmela jogging with Nick De Vries, and I can confirm that Nick De Vries is going to be working with Piru next year. Piru is employed by AlphaTauri, so he stays with the team and takes on the new driver. Who will Pierre be training with? Not sure yet. Found Sebastian Vettel playing table tennis with a couple of Olympic table tennis players, and if you watch my Instagram posts on the weekend you would have noticed that many of the drivers arrived in plain clothes, not their standard team kit. That's because of this city's dangerous reputation. Oh, and in the media centre we had for the first time these lockers which are worked by a code on your phone, and importantly they have 2 security cameras either side. And while a number of you have probably seen this system on the street, this is the first time we've seen it in a media centre. And I only know that because I've seen it on a couple of podcasts. And if you have your own podcast and you're looking to up the production value, let me tell you about Messages on Hold's podcast editing service. They take care of all the post-production on your podcast so you can focus on what's important to you, content creation. Whether it's cleaning up your audio, minimising background noise, balancing volume levels, adding intros and outros, or even just getting music and sound effects incorporated, Messages on Hold can help you with all of it. Basic editing starts around $250 Australian, and if you take a package, you'll save even more. To upgrade your podcast production, just click on the link in the description below and mention that Kim sent you and save 15%. Still on the subject of Thursday, Valtteri Bottas surprised me with his moustache. He actually said, look. And I said, yeah, I noticed it. It reminded me a lot of the movie Boogie Nights. It's all part of the Movember fundraising campaign, and he will be actually shaving it off later this month and then growing a mullet in Australia. And the other big story on Thursday was Lando Norris calling in sick for work, not able to do any media commitments, which left Daniel with a very long day. And I understand from Lando's manager that it all came on very quickly. 1 minute he was fine, 5 minutes later it was happening at both ends. On Friday we had lots of spectators hanging around out the front waiting for drivers to arrive, and they were in a frenzy as usual. And I'd like to tell you I'm doing a driver's drove video, but it's just too tricky at that track to be able to document what every single driver drove. And of course, none of the drivers drove the cars themselves, they all had drivers. Sebastian, I got the heads up that he was wearing an interesting t-shirt. This is it, front and back. So let's get on to the rain-affected qualification and a marvellous day for Kevin Magnussen and for Haas. I was actually standing waiting to come out for Parc Ferme next to Ted Kravitz, and Ted just took his earphone off and said, "You won't believe this, Kevin's first. He's going to get pole." Well, none of us believed it until, of course, the session ended, and then I caught him walking down pit lane, photographed him there, and there were great scenes of joy back at the Haas Hospitality Suite. Now, of course, that's down the far end of the paddock, so it's not often that all the TV and media go down that end. And as happy as Kevin was, it was very much a day for Gunther Steiner. He was over the moon about it. And if you're a Gunther fan, and I think probably many of us are, you can get yourself this image hand-signed and numbered by the Haas team principal by getting onto kimillman.com. He's signing in Abu Dhabi, and there are still some copies left. On Saturday there was some more promotional events with the drivers from Alpine playing this football game with Jefferson Solteldo, a well-known footballer in this country who had without a doubt the most spectacular watch on, and I featured that in my Watches of the Paddock post. Also on Saturday morning I came across Yuki Tsunoda playing a fun game of pull the card out from the bottle and see if he can get it to stand. Well, this went on for some minutes. He was with Caroline, his PR officer, and also Josh Cruz, who does social media for Alpha. And while I'm not doing a driver's drove video, I will say that the one car had no logo on the front. This was the car that Pierre Gasly arrived in, and I was intrigued as to what had happened to that logo. And at this point, I should say thank you to both the Williams hospitality crew and also the crew from McLaren for feeding me over the weekend. I had some lovely meals and I'm most indebted to them. You might have seen a post I put up on Saturday, I think it was, talking about the FTX logo coming off the Mercedes. Due to FTX going bankrupt, they just simply put a piece of grey sticker over that logo on the front of the Mercedes car. A couple of firsts for me in the paddock. I noticed that this particular team member was taking over the drinks bottle for one of the cars. I've never seen one of those before. And I also found this mechanic with a wheel nut on his belt, just simply tied with a couple of cable ties. I said, "What's that about?" And he said, "Well, in a pit stop, if one of those gets threaded or there's a drama, I can just simply rip that off and I'm not caught short." Look for that the next time you watch a pit stop. Let's now go to the sprint race, where I think a lot of people were hoping that Kevin Magnussen would end up on the podium. It didn't turn out that way. I think he ended up about 8th, but I did the start from the first turn on the pit wall, and I got to tell you, we get quite close to the action. They're coming at a fair speed, and it's more than a little frightening, but the shots you get are different to probably any other start shot that I can get anywhere around the circuits. And the sprint race winner was one George Russell, and he's pretty happy about it too. And what you might not have seen is back in Parc Ferme, 4 or 5 cars away, was Daniel Ricciardo and Sebastian having a little chat. Daniel went over there and shook his hand, and later on he admitted that Seb had been a very good friend to him this year, a year that's seen Daniel struggle. What next? Lando's hair, yes, very curly, I noted, throughout the whole weekend. Maybe it was something in the air. Fashion-wise, Lewis Hamilton wore these outfits over the 4 days. Oh, and on the subject of Lewis, getting an autograph from the great man is tricky, but the trick is to ask for it close to the garage, as this woman did here. Well, she was over the moon, because often he'll stop for a second or so, knowing that if it gets too busy, he can just duck into that garage. And that's exactly what happened. He signed this young lady's sweater and cap on consecutive days, and it was nice to see such an animated response. That brings us to Sunday and race day, which was warm, and then it got cool in the afternoon and grey. It was Lando Norris's birthday, and I happened to know that Karl-Heinz Hauser had arranged a cake. He'd even hand-drawn what he wanted and given it to one of his crew, but unfortunately, it was supposed to happen prior to the race, but Lando still wasn't well enough for that to happen, and I'm not even sure if it happened post-race. But it did happen last year, as these pics will attest. During the drivers' parade, we had a number of drivers wearing Brazil football jerseys, including Daniel Ricciardo, Lance Stroll, Pierre Gasly, and I think Esteban Ocon. And then we had a very eventful race. I went to turn 2, but then as you know, on the restart, we had Max and Lewis coming together right in front of me. Now, I have no idea whose fault it was. You're probably better versed than I was, but I was just very lucky that I followed those 2 cars down when I saw them close together. They touched, there was bits flying off both, but what was abundantly clear on the subsequent laps, every time Max came around, the crowd booed him, and that's because Lewis has this huge support here in South America. And then we had George crossing in first position, and it was so moving to watch George, because I was very close. I was right on the fence. In fact, at one stage I thought I was going to fall forward with the weight of all the Mercedes crew behind me. George admitted that he had tears within a few seconds of him crossing the line, and they didn't stop when he got to Parc Ferme. Lando Norris came over and congratulated him, and I love these photos, and this one was probably in my top 15 pics I've ever posted on Instagram. I followed him down to the press conference and listened to what he had to say there, and then I rushed out to do the celebration shots, and as usual, that's madness. But eventually somebody hoisted George up onto their shoulders, and despite the fact that I had a bit of sticky champagne on my lens, I managed to get some shots of George celebrating, and that's actually the cover picture of my Brazilian Grand Prix photo book. And then I thought the day was over, and I checked my phone and I saw a message saying, "Are you across all this drama between Max and Checo?" And just after that, I happened to see Checo coming back to the hospitality suite, and he's not looking thrilled. Now, on my post, 99% of the comments were in favour of Checo and very harsh on Max. I went and had a look at Red Bull's page, and hardly any support for Max. Long-time fans saying they were disappointed and disgusted. And from a team PR point of view, this is a real tricky one to get over, because the public seems to have now turned on Max. And I get on well with Max. I think he's a lovely fella, but I don't have to drive against him, and I'm probably not as passionate and caught up in the sport as many of you are. But certainly those comments have stirred up a lot of emotion in the marketplace. And I'm not even sure what a team like Red Bull can do to calm that. I know Christian Horner came out and said, yes, we've spoken with the guys, they've shaken hands, and it's going to be fine for next race. But gee, people take a long time to forget stuff like this, and it's unfortunate for Max that it looks like this championship will be tarnished by one action and a few words said over the radio. What will be interesting is the press conference on Thursday in Abu Dhabi, where both drivers and Christian Horner will face some more scrutiny on it. And with that said, I'm going to say thank you for watching this video. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so, and become a member. You'll find all of my digital images at prostarpics.com for a wide range of merchandise, F1 photo books, signed prints, and wall art. Go to kimillman.com. And for my best images live from the track and all during the week, head to Instagram and search at Kim Illman. Thanks for watching, and stay passionate.